I've come to realize that fear and shame especially are the two biggest creativity blocks that there are. And so with somebody who's saying, I don't have a creative bone in my body, I guarantee you their mindset is rooted in fear of how it turns out.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Hustle Up podcast. Today, we're sitting down with Miss Christy Renee, who just told us a fascinating story of travel, love, romance, relationships, and a whole. We'll get into it in just a minute. If you get value from this podcast, if you get value from this series, please hit subscribe. Please ring that bell. My name is Clint.
I'm Jonathan.
I'm Matt.
And
you.
Welcome, Miss Christy Renee.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who may not, or for those who may be meeting you for the first time, can you give a little background, a little story, who you are, what you do, and where you're going?
I'm not entirely sure I can answer all of those. With the adjective little,
Okay.
But I will try. I will try my best to be concise. Well, really, at heart, I'm a storyteller, and I feel that my greatest creation is the life that I'm living, and I think that everybody is able to have that power. And so, a lot of people, they say that I could never have the courage to do what you've done and create the life that you've created. And, it's kind of now my mission to say, yes, you can. Absolutely, you can. And it's available, a life by design is absolutely available to everybody. And, I saw that was on your podcast, and, for a long time that was the working title of my first book,
wow.
How to create your life by design. So,
Whoa.
it's
Intentional
very,
Living 101.
Yeah.
synchronistic. And I've had a lot of different chapters. Again, I'm a storyteller, I'm an author, so I'm sure we'll cover some of those today. But most recently, I'm back in the States. I'm back in Atlanta. This is my hometown, though I've been gone for about 15 years. I'm abroad for the last 5, and my intentions are to create a local community, to work with creatives, and, if any department heads of creative agencies are out there and they're listening, I've got something for you. I speed up the creative process and remove creative blocks within 30 days without generating a high-stress environment, which I think with the digital age, there's so much more stress, even than when I was in design school 10 years ago, and it's just not sustainable. So whether you're working in an advertising agency, design agency, or you're just, working on your life, this is applicable to everybody. Creation is what we're here to do. Every child is born an artist. Picasso said it best. And, I think reconnecting to that creativity has been the biggest part of my journey to develop me into the person who I don't want to say is living my dream, because to be honest, that happened like 4 years ago, and then I had a new dream, and then that happened, and then I had a new dream, and that happened. And so it's just constantly recreating an intentional life that at this point, I'm so blessed to say, I think it's been about 5 lifetimes of things, I never thought I would create. Now, it's not to say that it's all roses and rainbows.
Yeah, of course.
It's all about your internal state.
Yeah.
It's all about your internal state.
So let's dive into it immediately, because you've already said some things that are very interesting to me, because I write lyrics to songs, and I come into writer's block all the time, right? So what do you say to the person who may not even consider them creative and really might think, oh, I don't have a creative bone in my body? What's the process of taking someone from 0 to 1 in terms of creativity in 30 days?
I even wrote down, that's a bold claim. So how are you measuring advancement, and how does the process work?
Okay, those are 2 very different questions.
You can start with him.
Okay. So for instance, I have tips that I can share with people, but like actually taking somebody who's saying I'm not creative and walking them through in 30 days, that's not necessarily what my focus is.
Okay.
I think that it is possible, these tips apply to everybody. But for instance, it all comes down to fear is the biggest creativity block that there is. And I know this very well. I grew up in Marietta, Georgia, and I had very loving parents, an only child, very protective father. And despite their best efforts to, I don't know, they wanted to keep me safe and protected. And I grew up learning the world was a very scary place. So I feared so many things. You know, I was just telling you guys on the way over here that being stopped at a red light under a bridge gave me panic attacks for a long time. So, you know, noticing this fear and having the awareness that I do and studying my life and analyzing it, I've come to realize that fear and shame especially are the two biggest creativity blocks that there are. And so with somebody who's saying, I don't have a creative bone in my body, I guarantee you their mindset is rooted in fear of how it turns out, fear of the outcome. So, you know, the creative process is an expressive thing. You don't have to have any technical skills to express, let's say, an emotion. So for somebody like that, I would say, you know, choose an emotion and then express it some way, be it through painting with just colors and forms, be it, you know, you're a writer. So like one of the things that I like to do is I'm totally amateur at poetry. I'm just breaking into it. It's been one of the things that I said that I was going to do for so long, and I'm finally doing it. And so I find that the constraints of, you know, I picked a ballad for the first one. I just Googled beginner types of poetry and or beginner's guide, I think, to different types of poetry. And I saw, you know, a ballad is stanzas of 4 lines, and then you have 8-6-8-6 in an A-B-A-B rhyme scale or rhyme scheme. So, you know, having an idea of what I want to express and then having those constraints were so much more liberating than having a blank canvas.
I like that.
So,
yeah,
you know,
it's like having an idea and a plan. It's not just having an idea, but like it's kind of like there's guidelines here that give you lines to color within. And so you're not just starting on a blank canvas. You have principles and guidelines to follow that can help you express your creativity.
Exactly. I think a blank canvas is one of the most intimidating things that's out there in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so do you want to restate your question? That was a good question too. How do you, what kind of metrics do you use to help someone rephrase your question? Yeah. How are you measuring improvement?
You know, okay, so being totally transparent, this is one of the things that for scalability is very important to have that measurability, right? But for, you know, in the past, it's just been the breakthroughs come within that time frame. So it's been successful, right? Like there's, you know, methods to speed it up. I use research with Stephen Kotler. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his study on flow state.
We're big on flow state. Don't know that. Could you explain his study?
Yeah,
briefly?
absolutely. So he has the book Stealing Fire, which is fantastic. And in that he says, you know, that flow state is actually triggerable. So that's part of, you know, the basis of speeding up the creative process, because he shares techniques and trains agencies and corporations as well on speeding up I think just workflow and productivity is more his focus, but by 500%.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, it's like imagining that you have a team of employees that could come in to work on Monday at 9 a.m., leave at 5 p.m. on Monday, and get as much work done as a team that's there Monday through Friday.
Wow.
So it's a complete game changer.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. So you kind of just measure it, and instead of actual metrics of this is getting accomplished, just how do you feel?
Subjective breakthroughs?
Yeah.
So when they're self-reporting, well, I've had a breakthrough. This is transformative.
It's always happening. Yeah. But, you know, for instance, in the scalability phase, like how to have, you know, there is no ambiguity in great business. So it's like I've been working with some beta test groups right now, actually thinking about taking one more on. So again, if the listeners are department heads at a design agency, thinking about working with another one from a beta test to really get those specific metrics because, you know, they are so important.
So you mentioned earlier your target market wouldn't be somebody who says, I'm not creative, and then bringing them, you know, making them way more creative. You're looking for somebody who's already in a flow,
a creative mindset,
and improving it.
Yeah,
correct. And I, you know, it's hard because it's a passion of mine. So I'm like, the whole world can be creative, you know, like you are creative. But when it comes to working in business, you know, I've got a business coach and he's fantastic. He's been, you know, really, really helping me get down to the specific measurability and target audience. And that's correct, you know, especially with my background in design and then, going on this 10-year, 15-year hiatus where I thought, I'm just not creative. I just can't do it.
Let's talk about that a little bit, your
Yeah.
business coach, because we all talked about it a couple episodes ago about how coaching is very important and having mentors and leaning on people. How has that affected you?
Oh my gosh. Personally and professionally, it is the biggest saving grace that I've ever had. And, it's beautiful. It's absolutely, I have very, very close relationships with both of these people. I have a feminine leadership coach because, to be honest, like going through, the spotlight and performing and, everything, and then being a woman and understanding what that means in the modern world. We have flows, we have cycles. It's not the same as this masculine world, but we're playing in it. So understanding my own feminine power instead of just feeling less than and feeling weaker has been a huge journey of my own. And then on the flip side, working with my business coach, who's actually based in Berlin, Germany. He's very, he's very in touch with flow and flexibility and stuff like that, but he's got that German, like, this is how it is.
Yeah.
And I find that to be such a great contrast for me.
Oh, that's perfect. We talk about a lot of books that we read often, and we kind of have a spectrum of like, feminine energy books to masculine energy books. So like we'll read I read, on the feminine energy side, like The Way of the Superior Man, a book like that, or with the biography of Leonardo da Vinci, one of the greatest artists, inventors, because that creative thing is more feminine energy, whereas the pragmatic like logic of manifesting it into the world is more the masculine energy. And so we like to read a lot of literature that falls on that spectrum. So I immediately am understanding what you're saying about this. And so it's like that's kind of your balance too, is you've got that feminine energy leader or mentor and that masculine energy mentor. Do you have other ones as well in other areas of your life? So you have a feminine business leadership coach, that's right. And then you have your the actual business coach up in Germany. Do you have any other mentors in your life?
Oh, good question. I mean, I'm a forever student.
Yeah.
So anybody, mentors, I would say Stephen Kotler. Never met him. He's a mentor of mine because I've studied his work.
We talk about that a lot.
Yeah. No, because how you hear that you are a product of the people you hang out with most, or show me your friends, I'll show you your future type. So we're thinking, those don't have to necessarily be people. Like
I don't limit it to 5.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
What are your greatest inputs?
Yeah.
You are the average of your greatest inputs, the things that you're consuming, the conversations that you're carrying on. You are an aggregate of all of these things. So are they elevated? Are you learning? Are you growing? You said forever student. We say lifelong learner.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. You say you got a lot of wins in your life, right? And that you've done great things. You dream dreams that come true. How do you think that you derive at that point? Like we talk about all the time, we do affirmations in the morning. And I think this is very big because I think this is where people really hone in on kind of either what they're doing right or what they're doing wrong, right? So do you do affirmations or do you just think it into reality or
journal?
What do
Anything special to manifest your goals into fruition?
What are your rituals?
I love this. I can answer this in a very rare, concise sentence for me.
Okay.
Perfect.
Can I
I'm fired
curse?
up.
The
Can I-
Hustle
can
Up
I-
exclusive.
I'm on the edge of my
Hustle Up
seat.
exclusive
Am I
coming
allowed
at
to
you.
curse on this podcast?
Hell yes.
I do the shit that fucking scares me.
Turn
That's
up.
Do the
how.
next goddamn part.
Yeah, that's what we talk about.
That
It's
is the secret. I swear that
Yes.
is why I was so passionate.
Somebody
That's
call
before-
Gabe Pinto right now.
Let's get the button.
That's it. It's like do the hardest thing you can and then find the next hardest thing and get it done.
God, I'm in that right now.
Yeah. What is it for you right now?
Irrelevant.
Okay.
I really think
Matters
that's-
of the heart.
I
I'll
think
say
that's-
matters of the
Okay,
heart.
there you go.
It's just yeah. I've gone through such a process in my life of doing what scared me. At one point in time, that was graduating in 2009 with a design degree when the entire economy collapsed. I was going from 100% job placement. I had just devoted 4 years of very rigorous study to 100% job placement that was just like, nope.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I think that was really where the journey with courage began, because it's like, what am I going to do? Well, I had to figure out something, and I made a nice life for myself. And then I was like, I'm not really fulfilled here. Which again goes back to inner happiness. I've tried on a lot of different lives, and I don't regret it at all. I mean, I love it. But the happiness that I was seeking never came from any of the wins or the life. It came from the work with my leadership coach and figuring out what my passion is and facing my fears. And God, like, there's no better magic than doing the stuff that scares you. I swear. I have story after story after story. I'm writing my second book right now, and it's, I have a couple working titles.
What's
Titles
that
are
called?
really not my thing.
You
Titles
don't
are
know,
really
yeah.
not my thing.
Yeah.
But so no, this is interesting. So you said, what's that called? A lot of people have asked me when I say I'm working on my second book, they say, what's it about? Mm-hmm. And I've just recently figured that out, but I've been, collecting ideas on it for at least 8 weeks, maybe a couple months. And my answer was, I think that the reason that I was able to write my first book in 12 days, like I just went on some manic,
Dang.
channeling, crazy spree when I toyed it around for 6 weeks and got nowhere. I didn't even have a chapter finished until my friends, going back to who you surround yourself with, they were like, I was sitting in New Zealand. It was around Christmas time last year in 2018. And they were like, what you doing? I'm like, I'm writing my book. They're like, how many chapters do you have done? Well, none. I keep, I haven't learned everything. I had tears streaming down my face at this point. I was like, I haven't learned everything until it's going to be perfect yet.
See, I think
and
that's the problem. Everybody tries to be perfect, and everybody wants this perfect life, this perfect plan. Like, I'm not going to have kids until I make this much money. I'm not going to buy this house until this happens. It's like, just do it, just get in and do it. We talk about it all the time. Everybody's scared to action, right?
Yeah.
They want everything to line up perfect, and everything has to be perfect before they do it. But the best thing you can do is fail, because you learn the best things from failure.
You have to actively seek.
Right, so
failure.
that's great that you do stuff that scares the shit out of you. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people don't. They deter away from it, but that's how you grow.
That's how you grow. That's how you
light.
create the light. And,
Right.
I'm working with some people that I've met on my travels. In February, we actually have a resilience in action group training going live that actually still has a couple spots. So we can link that as well if anybody's interested. But it includes the step-by-step method for building bravery. So it's like, okay, you're listening, you're all fired up, and you're like, okay, yes, I'm going to do the stuff that scares me. Well, then what happens when the thing comes in front of you and you're scared? Are you just supposed to take that leap? How do you do that? How? You're paralyzed in fear. And we could get into that a little bit if you want, or
how do you do it?
There's so many ways. So the most important thing, and it comes down to creativity and it comes down to courage. That's why these are so linked. It's why I'm so passionate, because I'm like, my whole life has been, just one series of making this masterpiece. It's because it's the same. And if you don't feel safe, if you're not safe and vulnerable, there's absolutely no room for creativity. Brene Brown does the data research on that, and she talks about how there is no creativity without that. Well,
is that Daring Greatly?
I'm not sure if that's the book, to be honest with you. I just know her work encompasses the data around that.
Do you meditate?
I do. So meditation is, I'm such an overthinker. Meditation is such a challenge for me that I'm right now, again, restarting. And so my trick for that is that I just have to get in the mornings, especially if I find myself ruminating over the past or freaking out about the future, which is another creativity block. I will say, okay, I'm just going to lay here and I can't get up until I have 10 breaths that I don't follow the dragonfly. And that's, you're not supposed to silence the mind. You're just supposed to imagine that you're in a garden. A dragonfly floats by. You say, oh, hello, dragonfly. And you don't go chase
Hello,
it.
dragonfly.
Yeah.
So I have to get to 10 of those. And it takes a while.
How long do you think it takes?
I'm not timing myself.
Yeah,
I don't know.
like,
That
kind of would take the
feels like
purpose
2
away.
hours.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh, this is impossible. Usually I have to do it 3 or 4 times, because if I notice I've followed the dragonfly, I'll make myself start over. And then what's interesting is by the time that I get it, I notice that I can continue to 15, 20, 25, 30 most of the time. There's also a technique that my feminine leadership coach taught me, and it's like a home toning technique. And I'm absolutely not going to do it here in the mic, but you make a really loud home, but it's home instead of ohm. And you get it to the point where you feel it like sound healing from the inside out. And I find that that is more calming than meditation, but the meditation is, my brain is just
So you
all
brought
the
up
time,
two really
super
good points.
hyperactive.
One, breath control, because that's a lot of things that people don't do is breath control. And I think that helps you ease your mind and get out of that state of thinking about the past or the future and just get in like that meditative state, right?
Oh, yeah.
I really feel that that's very important to do that, and the humming as well, because then you're tricking your mind.
You are. And so this is an interesting point as well. So with the going back to the what you can do to build courage, breath is so important. But it's like, so part of my journey we didn't get into earlier is that in 2015, I didn't have health insurance. And as an American, that was a, risky move, but it was not set up to be frugal. Like, it didn't make sense at all. So I didn't have it, and my health started to fail. My hair was falling out. I had horrible adult acne. I found a breast lump. I couldn't eat anything without like my stomach ballooning like an orangutan. I was just like gut disease and body failure. I did every elimination diet I could think of. I was vegan for a while, gluten-free. I mean, I felt better, but I never felt great. And like these struggles tend to do, it ended up being the best thing that could have happened for me because I took so much self-responsibility instead of passing it off to a doctor. And, this, God, I never thought I'd be publicly talking about bowel movements, but,
Here we are.
Here we are.
it's in my first book too. It makes me blush. It's uncomfortable. But I went to a gastrointestinal doctor, and because I was so constipated that I just never went ever. And they were like, here, take this Miralax. You can take it every day. And I remember going to Costa Rica. It was my first big trip. And I filled a gallon Ziploc of it and stuck the labels to it so they didn't think that it was cocaine. And I later found I was, saw a commercial or whatever. And it had been one of the ingredients was on the list for Alzheimer's. I was like, and you told me to take that every day, a professional that I paid.
Yeah.
So having the self-responsibility of not having insurance and then healing myself within a year to be able to go travel the world was really the first dream that came true. And so looping back, when I was suffering from gut disease, I could not breathe. It was so important to have those big belly breaths. But when I had all the inflammation in my body all the time, it was just a kind of panicked breath, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't release. And that was that's so important, standing up on the cliffs this summer, I had to connect to my breath and I can feel it now in my feet. It's so scary, but I would never have been able to make myself leap over if my body was in that state of inflammation, because going back to needing to be safe, your body, our brains have this survival instinct,
Right.
where they want to keep us safe and out of harm's way. So if you're facing your fears, it's a risk. Your brain doesn't want to do it. So you have to overwrite that programming that says, stay safe. How do you do it? If you have too many different kinds of uncomfortable in your body, you can't be uncomfortable in growth as well. So I always say, go back to core connection. Our gut is the second brain. Scientists are calling it 90% of our serotonin is produced in the gut. So it's really shocking how many Americans suffer from gut disease and, preservatives. It's, we need a different topic of conversation. I could go on forever.
I'm with you because I was diagnosed with Crohn's when I was a sophomore in high school, but I haven't taken medicine in years because I figured out the same thing. If you heal from internally and get that mind, body, spirit connection, and I really think if you can mitigate processed sugars and eliminate stress, or do your best to eliminate both, that's really where the healing comes from. And you also get to learn interesting things. I'm very in tune with my body now to where if I'm stressed in a certain capacity of life, or if even that gut feeling, I'm more in tune, because you get inflammation. My body will literally tell me, do not keep doing this, or do not do this. And you can make your mindset and actions. Once you get, it's like you were saying, the reason that resonated is because when you said it's a blessing, some of these hardest things are blessings, is because I feel the same way. Had this not happen, and I did take the medical route where you're putting a Band-Aid over something that's a much deeper wound, with worse things that come after it, worse, reciprocal, like you were saying, you found that in the Miralax, there's that one ingredient that was linked to Alzheimer's. Every medication has something like that, but when you heal internally and get in tune, that's when you're you really can eliminate disease. And again, remember what disease is. And for anyone listening, just remember disease is dis-ease, when you're not at ease. And if you can get everything in ease, mitigate your stress, have a healthier diet, and really be grateful for things and change your mindset, then the body follows suit, I believe. So that was interesting that you brought that up.
Did you notice anything? Like, did you start taking probiotics or anything like that? Because there
Probiotics
is some
were
pills that I
huge.
really believe in. Like, probiotics changed my life once I started taking them.
And I'm the same way, but I wouldn't. It's interesting to hear you say there's some pills that I believe in. For me, I would never classify probiotics as pills. And you're right, they are in a capsule.
Right.
But yeah, so probiotics are really the secret to what healed me. And I started to think that they were like the secret key for everyone. And then I found out that depending on your issues,
Right.
it's like everything. It's not necessarily the best. But mine came from, so my gut was out of balance. And it's like, so preservatives are, I use the analogy of saying, imagine that you have good guys and you have bad guys in your gut. You have the bacteria. And when in the late 1980s, when preservatives really started coming out and then the agricultural industry changed, they started taking this product that was wheat that was really not unstable, but it was irregular in its harvest. Some would die really early, some would still be green. They found that they could desiccate it, killing it, making it all die at the same time and have a bigger yield. Well, what they were using is glyphosate, which is the chemical component of Roundup. So what was happening is all of this wheat was getting into the plants at a cellular, all of this glyphosate was getting into the plants at a cellular level. So when you eat it, compounded over time and time and time, plus if you're, growing up in the States when I was, they'll give you antibiotics for anything. Sinus infection, here, antibiotic.
Right. Yeah.
So you're killing, it's like going into a bank and that has hostages and robbers and, dropping a bomb on the bank so that you can kill the robbers. It's like, well, what about all the good guys you've just obliterated? So the gut biome's the same way. And so what so many of us are doing are just obliterating all bacteria with hand sanitizer, with, the wheat. And they finally, I think a couple years ago, outlawed the desiccation process. But think about how many millions of tons of products that are already gone through that. I mean, it's going to be
so much. Like, you look at GMOs now, right? And like we were talking about earlier with Monsanto and GMOs and all the stuff that we're putting in our body now that's synthetic and not even real anymore. Like, you think this tomato looks good, but it's not good for you at all because it has no nutritional value in it.
So how do you combat that? How do you find, is it shopping at organic markets, or how do you get your food?
Yeah, sure. Well, first on that, so the idea with GMOs is that for me, I don't necessarily think all GMOs are bad, because it's just, like breeding two different kinds of crops together for some, and that's existed for a really long time. However, when I take issue with it is when they breed like corn and I don't, it's been a while since I've looked into it. I can't remember what else are the big ones, but they're breeding it to be more pesticide resistant, which means they can douse those things in even more pesticides. And when we ingest that, that's going into us. And then the problem with it is that we haven't lived through enough generations of this before it's spread globally. So, organics, yes, that's absolutely my solution right now. And, there's the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. The Dirty Dozen are the ones that like really, really absorb the pesticides. Like cucumber, that's, 90-something% water. If you're spraying in pesticides, it's 90% pesticides. But with Monsanto, they're spreading, and eventually, it gets into the soil, it gets into the air. You have an organic farm right here. You have a GMO pesticide-laden farm right here. Eventually, it's gonna overtake it, and I think that's the scariest thing happening. But yes, I cook 90% of my meals at home, and I eat very super clean. I didn't when I was in Europe. I was really diligent for a while, and then Italy happened, and it was a slow, slippery slide down into puff pastry. Feeling like I was like, if I take one more bite of cheese, I'm going to turn into a puff pastry. So I've been training super hard and going back to clean eating since I've been home. And the thing that I realized is that I got off track for a while, and I think a lot of women probably do as well. We're so concerned with if I look more perfect on the outside, I'll feel more perfect on the inside. Whereas when it comes to eating the way that I do, when I eat very alkaline and eat very leafy green heavy and nice like healthy fats and very, very clean, I notice I shine from the inside out. And that's not just some like Bali woo woo spiritual shit. Like I like looking in my eyes, it's They do. They change. The color is more honey. There's more green in them. It's more vibrancy. I feel the vitality from the foods that I eat. So
That's awesome. That's super
Yeah.
cool. I feel that too. Let's talk about your travel for a second.
Yeah.
Did you go to any country or it maybe, I don't know, did you go to any country where you just had extreme culture shock?
ooh, that's a great question. Okay, well, the first thing that comes to mind is this shows how green I was when I landed in Lisbon, Portugal. In 2016, it was my first time. It wasn't my first time out of the country. I did a study abroad to New Zealand in 2008, but it was my first time to Europe. It was the first destination on this big, one-way ticket trip. And I was just like, my eyes were this big. I was just, what is this? And I was jumpy and I was scared. And I went back to Lisbon and I was like, this is this is so comfortable.
Yeah. Had you been out of the country before you got that big one-way ticket trip?
In 2008, I did a study abroad to New Zealand and
Okay.
Fiji,
Okay.
which was my first time.
Yeah. What was your favorite country and why?
So I get that question all the time. While I was traveling, the answer was usually almost this, and it was always true, whichever one I'm currently in. I would go to a new country and I'd fall in love and be like, oh, I should look at houses here, and then I'd go to the next one and do the same thing. But I do have some favorites now. It's Slovenia tops the list, which took the cake this summer, which I take it back. Slovenia sucks. Don't go. I don't want anybody to know about it. That was part of the charm. It was so charming, and the nature was so breathtaking. It was varied. It was dynamic. New Zealand was my favorite country for a long time because of the mountains and the contrast between just all the different landscapes. And so Slovenia, Estonia, and Croatia are my favorites, and they're all rooted in that I arrived to each of those three at different points in my life with zero expectations. For whatever reason, I just had none, and it allowed life to surprise me, and they ended up being my favorite experiences. And it's a metaphor that I wish I could practice less attachment and less expectation more frequently, because it's the same with life. If you go in without any expectations, you are thrilled at everything.
So that's a good thing. And I was just talking to someone the other day about this, because it gives me kind of cognitive dissonance, because you hear some people say visualize something the whole way through. And for me and some of the people I know, like when we want to do something and visualize it, 90, if not a little higher % of the time, it comes out almost identical to how we had seen it in our heads. But then you also hear people saying don't set expectations. So I'm like, what's the why? Why is that a thing? And that's my question to you is, if you believe in someone help me out here.
Visualization.
There you go. If you believe in that and the ability to truly manifest off doing the right things and making a proper plan and executing, why not have expectations?
Well, I mean, the simplest answer is that attachment, and expectations and entitlement, and really expectations are just attachment to an outcome. They're the root of all suffering. If you go back to like Daily Stoic, which I think on our first phone call conversation, I was sharing that. And, Marcus Aurelius wrote these meditations 2,000 years ago. So going through.
Whoa.
He's reading it right now.
Whoa. I was not prepared. Yeah.
2,000 years ago, they're having the same angst that we're having right now. Why am I here? What's my purpose?
We
all of
came
that.
to the same conclusions. You can go back 2,000 years ago, or you can go back even farther to what are the 7 Hermetic principles. We're coming to this new age idea. It's not new age, it's ancient. And people have been coming to the same religious conclusions and dealing with the same internal battles as long as we've been recording written history.
That's right.
So I've been battling with something huge, and me and Jonathan were talking about it the other day, and it's like, when do you move in silence, and when do you manifest it and talk about it and tell people? Because I know some people say, yeah, don't tell everybody about it, because then it won't come true, because you're talking too much about it, and then people are coming
Someone else
against
might
you.
steal
My
it.
question to you is, do you think anyone knows?
Do you think
Do I
anyone
think
Do you think
cares?
anyone has the answer?
I hope so. That's what I'm
No,
looking
but
for.
what do
I
you
don't
but
think
what would
so.
you say to the person who's like it's a question of talking too much shit or speaking into existence. And like, you know, for me personally, like I put a lot of things on Instagram and I say a lot of things that are super ambitious, but I feel like it's for reasons of accountability. It's like I've told this many people things, so I have to jump in the deep end and learn how to swim. And like the Vikings have the burn the boat mentality. Like, you know, when they go to war, they would burn their boats because it's either win or die. And I feel like when you do that and you tell things to people, it's not talking shit. It's really setting up a scenario in which success is your only option. So what do you think? Like, what is it? Is it if you're saying things, is it talking shit or is it speaking into existence?
I think it depends for every person.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not sure that it's so. Going back to the question about why not have have the visualization that's super clear versus you know, the attachment. And what I'll say about that is, what's the intention behind your visualization? And I think that it comes down to ego manifestations, ego desires, and like soul desires, right? And like when you get, and I spent most of my life not knowing what my soul desired. I found it when I faced my biggest fear of public speaking. Then I knew that feeling that I wanted to generate for the rest of my life. And so the things that now I visualize, now I want to manifest, are all going after that feeling. They're not to have like the biggest house on the block because I have to prove it to my neighbors, right? That would be an ego desire. And I think that you can want to have the biggest house on the block, but maybe it's because you like having all of your family over and you like the light that comes in and you feel joyous
Interesting.
by having that space.
I love that answer.
That
by
was
the way.
perfect,
I
yeah.
mean, you just laid it out great for me. So it's like your
Yeah.
intentions on what you're doing.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
It also sounded
never
That
like
was awesome.
you said with Slovenia, Estonia, and Croatia, it sounded like part of the reason they may have been your favorite was the novelty of surprise and discovery. When you went in without expectations, you had the ability to be surprised and get that serendipitous, like you weren't going in expecting anything, but here's what you found. Is that accurate?
Of course, definitely. Yeah, like Croatia, I was there for the first time in 2016, and I had just come from 5 days spent camping right outside Venice. Like, just no, like just I did it all wrong. Like first, you know, Venice is very much sorry if anybody has this on their like dream list. It's Disney World. It's so crowded.
And it's dirty.
It's so dirty. Yeah, a lot of places are dirty, but I think like the overcrowding, you know, it just really makes it culturally a wash. And 5 days there, everything was way overpriced. It wasn't the Italy I'd always dreamed of, you know, that was down south and I was missing it. And I was just burned out, you know. It was month 4 of being on the road for the very first time, and I was just like, man, this just is not
Good
doing
wine
it.
though.
Not there. Not even good food. Like even
Oh,
people
really?
from Italy will say Venice, it doesn't even have good food. Yeah, it was like not that at all,
As
right?
you
And I had
move
come
from
Barcelona.
north to south, the pizza gets progressively better.
Is that fact?
That's
Really?
a fact.
So
would
I
would
gotta-
you confirm?
As you go from north to south.
So like Venice to Sorrento,
Oh,
I think
okay.
it gets better. And you get, so Rome's kind of in the middle, and Rome has fire pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Top tier.
So where was the nicest people? Where did that take place?
2 answers. They're tied and different reasons. Cambodia, Phnom Penh, and this goes back to the inner happiness thing. I think that was the biggest lesson that I learned there. That was at the end of my 20 countries and 11 months travel. It was the last destination before I went home, and that's when I really realized, wow, holy shit, look at these people who have survived the most terrifying thing, you know, with Pol Pot. Like, there were still so many of them alive, so many of their parents that were directly affected or killed, and they have, you know, the killing museums, and it's not artificial skulls representing,
Right.
it's the actual skulls. And you have these people here that are just so joyous and happy, and they want to help you. And it's like, yeah, of course, because they see you as money, but it doesn't have that expectant energy. I remember that there was a tuk-tuk driver that, you know, me and my friends were like, hey, here's, you know, $20, be our driver for the next like 2 or 3 days. And he just like came up at the end and was like profoundly grateful, like, thank you so much for giving me this work. And even just throughout the day, like, just everyone has a smile on their face. And I think that it goes back to being happy to be alive versus, you know, speaking of privilege, like, I have had a lot of privilege, and my dad worked really, really hard to give that to me, and he didn't have a lot. And so now being back and spending time with him, I'm like, Dad, like my mental battles are more difficult because I actually told him, and that he loved this, and I guess any father would. I told him that, like, studying him and being back and spending time with him, his mental state is what our generation is spending thousands of dollars on coaching and life coaching and masculinity and books and stuff to learn. I'm like, you are, like, I watched when his beloved husky unexpectedly passed a couple weeks ago, and I watched the whole series of emotions, and when he came back up, like, he was angry, he went down and hit the punching bag, and like he came back up and he was like, no, you're right, we should all be together. And I'm like, Dad, you were just an infographic for, like, how to process emotions. I was like, I wish I never left. I wish I could have learned that sooner. But I lost my train of thought.
Well, what are some of those things that when you observe someone and see that kind of magnitude of, let's call it mental acuity, what are some of those things that you observe that, like, make that, the star child, the poster child of this?
Well, that's what we were saying. But yeah, strife. He has seen a lot of death in his young life. Mm-hmm. And he grew up with an appreciation for life. So, if something, he keeps telling me, he's like, the older I get, the more I realize it's not all, like, nothing's that important anyway. Yeah. And I finally understand, like, he would ask me this question all my life, and I never got it until the last few weeks. What's the most important thing in life?
Happiness.
To enjoy it.
Yeah.
Which exactly. I wouldn't necessarily say is the same as happiness, because I think that
if you enjoy it, then you're happy.
I would disagree with that.
Really?
Let's hear it.
Yeah.
Why? If you're enjoying life, then how are you not happy?
Because in the enjoyment of life, there's not always going to be happiness. There's not always going to be up times. So if you're striving for that up all the time, you're going to find a lot of suffering. However, it's been said that the greatest human experience is to feel. Mm-hmm. And, I think you asked me the other day, like, how's it been being back in Atlanta? And I was like, dynamic. Like, it is dynamic.
Well, you think about...
Go ahead. I think that being able to enjoy the lows, let's say, because that, without the dark, the light doesn't shine. And if you're just always going for that high, you're not experiencing the full range of human emotion.
Do you think it's naive to even think that you could stay high? Because I feel like, life is cyclical. We understand that it's got its ebbs and flows. It's kind of like a roller coaster. It goes like that. But you can do your best to have an equilibrium and go through, kind of stay humble at your highs and stay high at your lows.
For sure. And I think that comes with, like, an inner peace and knowing you can stay centered through it all. And I think that is enjoying it.
Yeah.
And that's like
what the Buddhists
disagree.
practice.
It's basically the same, but I have a friend that's actually working in this.
Now that you put it that way, I can agree with you, because when I went to Africa, I saw the same thing. When we went to Uganda, we saw people that were famine, that were getting nasty malaria water and drinking it with their hands, but some of the happiest people I've ever seen in my whole life. And it really touched me and changed me, because you give these kids, like, a piece of bubble gum, something everybody here takes for granted. And it's like, you just gave them a Ferrari Testarossa. And they was just like, oh, man, this is so awesome, and just so happy, and just wanted to help you out and love on you and hold you, and just, they didn't have anything. They had one pair of clothes. Most of them didn't even have shoes. Most of them never knew who their dad was, and they live in a little hut that's made out of mud. You know what I mean? But they were some of the happiest people I've ever met in my whole life. So that really changed me. When I came back from that, I'm like, man, I'm doing this all wrong.
Did it stick with you?
It stuck with me 100%. I think about it almost daily, to be honest with you.
That's great. I would love to be able to tap into that a little bit more. Like I shared, that's definitely a journey of mine right now, is the
we went all over Uganda, the whole country. We toured everywhere. And you've seen some of these people were brutally murdered.
That's crazy.
Back in the day, they just used to come in and just kill their whole family and just rape the women and pillage everybody. It was awful. But out of that, like you were saying earlier, came some of the greatest things ever. And they love life and they appreciate things, just the smallest things.
Well, it's interesting because how evolution has kind of changed humans. At first it was about physical survival. We had to hunt for our food. We had to make sure animals didn't kill us. And now I think it's more about mental survival, because we have all of this already. Our minds aren't focusing on surviving. They get bored. And now, like, because now that we don't have to spend our days trying to physically survive anymore, what do we do? And when people get bored and lack that action, that's when the fear kicks in. And that's when, now I think that's what the evolution is. While we perceivably have more things and a bigger environment to be happier than the people in Uganda, it's different because we're fighting different mental battles. I think caused by, call it boredom, call it social media, call it different kinds of things that are making people operate more off their ego than their gut feeling or their intuitive side.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you bring that up. I couldn't agree more. You have the different parts of the brain. We've got the prefrontal cortex, which is like that neurotic, always on inner defeatist, Woody Allen. And that's the one's like, I can't. Stephen Kotler, as we were talking about, actually notes how to get into flow state, and that's when that shuts off. So that's part of speeding up the creative process, speeding up his productivity. But then we have the amygdala at the back of the brain, which is responsible for the fear. And exactly, because we don't have these threats in our life anymore, but that part of the brain still functions at full capacity. So, we're walking down the street and we see a stick. We don't think, oh, that could be a snake, like, be careful. That's not what we think. We think, oh, don't say that. Maybe shut up, they'll judge me, And so it's just always like trying to fire different things, and it, it's the privilege, it's the other side of privilege if we're not actually working with our hands. Another reason why I think that creativity has been deemed the 21st century's most important skill. So it's like, not only that, but you see people that work with their hands, they're so happy. There's the shoe repair guy that lives down the street from my parents, and I went in and I took some shoes, and he's just working with his hands all day, and he's the happiest guy I've ever met. He's just working with his hands all day. And I think that being in front of a screen, we really lack that, and the fear kicks in a lot more.
I like how you said creativity is the most important tool of the 21st century, and you also said when we were first talking on Instagram, you said design is future proof. Can you expound on that a little bit?
I think I probably said creativity is future proof.
Okay.
But they're pretty much synonymous, but a little bit different. Creativity is future proof. The only thing that they're predicting that AI can't replicate is human ingenuity. Right? Like they've gotten it to at least yet, sure, but if you think about it, it doesn't seem likely that it'll happen. So they can get an AI to write a book. But without the human experience, without the storytelling, the emotions, like how are they going to get AI? And, maybe we're talking like super
well, even
down
so,
the road,
because humans are in like an infinity loop of inputs and outputs. AI have to have an input. Our inputs are generated by like intuition or by the universe or God, whatever you call it. But AI cannot operate without inputs. You have to first code an AI before it can be. It's that element of sentience that makes us human. And I liked what the word you said. What'd you say? Human ingenuity. Like that is. You can't replicate that in robots or in any kind of AI. So do you think that, so how do you define creativity, or how do you define creativity? Like what would be your definition of it? And I'm not looking for like a Webster's, like I'm looking for Christy's definition.
Oh, I like that. Good question. Let me think for a moment. My definition of creativity. I'd have to say that it's that moment when you forget to eat or drink or need external validation from your phone or from any other source, or you forget about comparisons, about the media telling you you're not enough. You forget all of that, and you're just like you're so focused on what it is at the task at hand. You're just there.
Flow state.
Yeah.
So we talked about, on the very last podcast, we interviewed a man named David Joseph, who also got on the topic of storytelling. So there's good symmetry here, back to back. And one of the things that was brought up is the best storytellers draw the audience out of their shell, out of themselves, into this moment where they forget about their day, forget about their food, forget about their fights, whatever. And it sounds like, too, you said that your canvas is on stage. You found your creativity on stage. Do you find that same forgetting about, getting lost in the moment when you're presenting?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's happened several times, even just talking here. Yeah, it's my favorite, and I love what he says. Yeah, about taking the audience. It's taking them on a journey through emotion. So your story becomes their story, and they're just wrapped up in it. And we just talked about the future's most important skill. I don't know if he covered this, but the most valuable skill when we were all still, sitting around campfires all the time was storytelling. Because how did you pass down information of what's safe, what's not safe, what you need to know? It would be the person who had the stories would be the most valuable person of the tribe.
Wow, that's interesting.
That's funny you say that because they also say the people with the best memories always put it to story to remember things too. So
Memory palace.
Yeah, memory palace.
Say that again. I'm not familiar with that.
So to remember things, they put things into story form.
Oh, yeah.
To remember things, like he's talking about memory palace.
It's insane. So you might envision yourself in your house, and they're memorizing hundreds of digits of numbers in 20 minutes using a technique they say anyone can learn. You might be in your house, and then you're associating this number or this set of numbers.
That's how I remember my speeches from stage. Yeah, you walk through. I didn't know that's what it was called. I heard it by story map. Eric Edmides taught that technique.
For anybody watching that wants to memorize crazy amounts of things, would you call it story map?
But a fellow speaker asked, what are you doing for notes? How do you remember? And I told her this, and I was like, I think you can look up story mapping, but I Googled it and I didn't see it. So I don't know. More
palace
information
is another
is
name.
needed.
Yeah.
More information needed.
That's fascinating.
But you associate, you stand on your doormat, your doormat, and you're like, that's the opening of my, opening of my speech. I don't know. I don't have one right now. I can't just make it up. But yeah.
Even one of my guys that I used to work with, he would remember every single person that walked in the door. Even if he met him one time, I'm like, how do you do that? He's like, I just remember them by associating them with something else, and it always pops back in my brain. I'm like, that's crazy. I thought it was so fascinating.
Yeah, and that it's like remembering people, remembering things, but then also I'm sure you've heard that, you are the stories you tell yourself. So even on an internal, introspective element, storytelling, really makes you emanate who you are, and it's so important. Have you heard of that before? Obviously, I see your face, maybe
speaking to the choir.
Yeah.
Shadow and light, two sides to see everything. I found my canvas, and my biggest passion was storytelling. And when I tell stories, it's better because I'm expressing it. But when I don't, the shadow side of that is I tell myself incessant stories in my head, and I can get very obsessive with creating meaning in things that don't exist just to drive myself crazy because I'm human, I guess, and that's what we do. But absolutely, it's constantly narrating your own story to create the life that you want, because whatever you're telling yourself is what comes true.
I see you being a good director. Have you ever thought about doing something like that, like getting into film or anything and just going that side, tapping
but I'm
into
interested.
something totally
Keep going.
different? That's what I do, and I just love it, and I see that you're passionate about a lot of the same things, and it's crazy that we're all talking about storytelling, but I really feel like that to tap into something and really remember it, you have to associate it with something, right? So when you're associating things with your memory, I feel like I have problems remembering stuff some days, and my receptors cross paths. One day I could tell you something that I know all about Nikola Tesla, and I can tell you everything about him, and then the next day I'm like, man, I don't know anything about Nikola Tesla.
What was Tesla's first name?
What did he invent again? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know why that happens, and that's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of. I don't know if it's a receptor thing or it's in my brain or something, but I'm trying to get to the bottom of it.
How do you stay consistent in thought?
How do you stay consistent in thought, and why does that happen?
Are you asking me?
Miss Neuroscientist?
throwing it out there because
I don't know. I'm curious.
It's so weird to me.
I don't know if now's the platform, but I'd be curious for you to explain more, because I'm not really so the first thing that came up is, you have to remember something, you have to attach something to it, as you were saying. I don't remember the exact word that you used, but basically it's emotion. And sales are the same way. If you're wanting to sell something, and if you want to design something for corporate companies, if you want to remember something, you have to attach emotion to it. Right? That's how we remember. But then when you were saying that some days you'll remember it really well and some you won't, I don't know, my brain goes to lack of sleep, focus, I don't know, but more information's needed.
Have you read Way of the Wolf by Jordan Belfort?
I have not.
So he's got something you said reminded me. Shout out Jordan Belfort, great book. He's the Wolf on Wall Street. Okay. And one of his techniques, after you close a sale, he has this strong scent. I don't remember what it's called, but it's a balm. And you sniff. It's like Vicks Vapor Rub. He uses Vicks Vapor Rub right after you close the sale when you get that win. Then as you're going into the next sail, you pop out that vapor rub and you re-trigger that
Ooh,
feeling.
So
Your
your
I
sense
like
of
it.
your sense of smell
That
brings
sense of
you
the wolf.
back to
that
that
associative
emotional state.
feeling. Yeah.
Quick.
Whoa.
Yeah, cheating.
I love
But,
it.
yeah.
Is it cheating or
No,
is it
it's
using
smart.
a tool
It's
to
smart.
be more
It's another tool in the
efficient?
tool belt.
Yeah. So who are some of your favorite creators or designers that and why? Point blank, easy
Good
maybe
question.
not. Yeah.
No,
I don't know.
favorite. I was actually just talking about this right before I sat down. It's like my friend was saying, oh, that's one of my top 5 albums from the last 5 years. And I was like, I like that you rank stuff. I just say everything's my favorite, you know? It's kind of like, what's your favorite country? Whichever one I'm in right now.
Yeah.
But favorite creators, you would think that would be easy. And it's having...
Well, with your definition
I'm
of
not sure.
creator, you know, when I think creator, I'm thinking strictly like my definition of
Music
creativity.
director,
Yeah,
stuff
exactly.
like
Like
that.
something pragmatic, but I like how you've defined it because it opens up the like what could be a creator. It's anyone
Or
who
anyone could be a
creates.
creator.
Yeah, and it's potential, right? It's
Yeah.
like anybody who's doing, so okay, this is a totally out of the box answer. Some of my favorite creators are the people living in Havana, Cuba. Because when
Hey.
I went there, I got to see what it was like to have everything from America and then shut off. So they had these cars. I don't know if any of you guys have been. And actually, I don't even know if Americans can go
Not
again right
anymore.
now. But I
Not
was like
now.
in that
Yeah, they
one
just
little
started.
window.
We
Yeah.
opened it up and then
Yeah.
shut it back.
I went
Yeah.
in that one window. But I remember being so impressed by and here's this word again, but the human ingenuity of how they would piece together these old cars with other things, and they would like solder it, and they'd probably, I don't know, super glue stuff together, and they just made it work. And I remember the host house that I was staying in at the homestay, his wife was a doctora, and she was, he was just, like in admiration of her intelligence. And to impress her one day, he affixed like this, it was basically just a towel rack hanging outside, but like how he had to do it and the tools that he had to use was just, I was like, this is creativity. And I love that because it's resourcefulness, it's ingenuity, it's using what's around you instead of doing that of, and I love like upcycling, and I know that was a thing probably in 2015 before I left
I'm
the
not
States,
familiar
but
with that term.
basically taking trash
Okay.
and making art out of it, like metal scraps and doing
It's like
metal
MacGyver.
work. Like
Belt line.
The MacGyver way.
I still have not
I don't know.
been. That
You haven't been to
wasn't-
the Beltline yet?
Not yet, no.
What part of town are you in?
East Cobb, Roswell.
Perfect. Okay, cool.
So who are some of your
Everybody
favorite
keeps talking about it.
creators? Can you pick one?
I'm blanking.
Designers?
The first thing that comes out is kids.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
I this is kind of a funny story, but so I'm an only child, and kids always kind of scared me. And I'm in my 30s now, my early 30s, and I'm like, okay, kids should probably stop being so scary at some point. And actually, I got to the root of why I think that they were scary. It's because kids read energy. You can't have masks. And before, when I was going through my journey and I didn't know who I was, I put on different identity masks, slapped them all over myself, and was like, I am this person. It's like, no, you're not. And kids can sense that, right? And so and coming back home and being with family, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to set the intention. I want to hang out with kids more, like be it nature or outside. I just want to hang out with kids. Their play there. And this is a longer tangent, so I won't go there, but if you want to bring it back up, the power of play was a huge pivotal turning point for me in 2018. So I came downstairs, one afternoon. My family was going to be having dinner. I was up. I think I was meditating. I was sitting in like the vibrating office chair, and I was just like, everybody shut up. I need alone time. And I came down, and there's this little girl playing that I didn't even know, like, we had little kids in our neighborhood. And she's this 5-year-old girl, and I'm like, okay, what up, little girl? And so we're sitting at the table, and we're eating, and I love vegetables. We already talked about how they make me feel radiant, and she's sitting there, and I'm like, okay, what, did you go to Shallerford Falls? Do you go there? And she's like, oh, how did you know? I was like, well, I used to go to school there. She's like, what's your favorite vegetable? I was like, wow, vegetables, little kid?
That's
Okay,
right.
you're cool. Spinach, what's yours? She's like, spinach. Then we bonded over juices. Then she starts doing, like, jumps up. She saw that I did ballet when I was her age. There's a photo, of me on the mantelpiece. And she starts, like, training me in ballet moves, which is basically bar, which is like super popular and something that I love. And she's strict. She's like, fixing my posture and stuff like that. And I ended up having the best time getting out of my head, out of my shell, running around, being silly. I felt like the biggest creator. I felt like a kid again. And a couple days ago, I noticed that I was starting to get really stuck in my work again. I'm in that masculine development phase. And so I went over and I knocked on the door and I was like, can Maya come play after school today? And she had piano lessons. She made me a note and brought it. I was on a call and I missed it, but she made me a note. And so to go back to like favorite creators, I wish that I could think of, a long list of content, and that's actually part of what I want to bring more into my life. But if I have to answer honestly, it's kids, because they don't have the fear yet. Everybody colors, everybody paints, they just do, they just go.
Or the filter, and they're so honest.
And I admire that,
Yeah.
I still do it more than maybe I could, but I filtered everything, part of those identity masks, because I was always thinking 10 steps ahead of, if I said this, then they would see me like that. And kids don't care.
No,
It's
I think
awesome.
that's absolutely a great answer. And one of my favorite creators is Kanye West, and he's always talking about trust the kids, follow the kids, believe the kids. And he was on Ellen DeGeneres once having an interview, and he was talking about, a little 3-year-old kid stands up on the table and likes to shout and play, and then the dad or the mom will bring them down, tell them don't do that, and hit their hand, and then they associate a negative feeling with elevating themselves on this platform. And the more kind of allegorically that happens to you through different situations throughout your life, where you get hit on the wrist and you're like, oh, I can't do this, or I shouldn't do it like this, and then you lose that inner child, because then you just end up getting in your head of should I or shouldn't I. But the children, like you were saying, they just do, they just are, they feel the energy, they have no filter, and they move off their vibe, to call it the least. And it's about those compounded stories and negativity that you get from feedback growing up that prevents you from tapping into, let's call it, your inner child.
Absolutely. And, I think that it's so interesting that we just learn to systematically train that out of us. And I was always a straight A student, and I took pride in it, and top of my class. And really, I've come to learn that all I did was get very, very good at giving the answers
Being
that
obedient.
people wanted me to give.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, a little bit sad that is how the culture is. And if I have anything to say about it, we'll all be more creative.
There you
We
go.
won't have
Yeah.
that. We won't have all that fear.
Yeah, no, 100%. So when what's your goal? You said your mission right now. Restate your mission of what you're trying to accomplish right now.
That is a very broad statement.
I think you had a mission statement.
Do you mean in terms of business, professionally?
Well, if you could take like what's the underlying principle in your professional and personal life of who you're trying, like what's your purpose right now?
Unleashing creative spirit.
From yourself
For
and
sure.
others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I have to distill it down and combine the both, it's, enjoying creative expression without an end result in mind.
Yeah.
So I actually am meeting up with some friends. If you're a creative and you live in Atlanta, message me on Instagram. Let's be friends, because I want to go do creative stuff. And my friend was like, maybe we can go to the Beltline, because I said I hadn't been there yet. And I was like, well, there's supposed to be tornadoes tomorrow, so I don't know. Like, I have paint and canvases. Like, let's just like throw it at the canvas or at each other. I don't care. Like, I don't know what yet. But
just
I'm
cover
going
the
to start...
blank canvas.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's what I'll end up doing, but I keep reaching out to creatives through LinkedIn and through Instagram that are local, and I'm like, what do you do for fun? What do you do for fun creatively around town? And no one has said anything other than, oh, I really should create more for fun. And there are these people that are working creatively, and if you don't remember to do it for fun, the passion goes away, and then you start losing that flow state, and then creative blocks come up, and then shame comes up, because your identity is wrapped in being a creator. Your livelihood is wrapped in being a creator. Yeah. The less you create, the more shame you have. The more shame you have, the less you create.
I feel like that's all I do is create. Everyone's always like, have you seen this show or this show or this show? I'm like, no, I haven't. They're like, why? I'm like, because I'm making music, or I'm painting, or I'm doing something, or I'm directing a video or something. And I do it all for fun. You know what I mean? And it just ends up paying me money. but I do it because of my passion for creating things. I love starting with nothing, like I do music, and I'll start with a song, just start hitting on beat, or I'll even started recording stuff in my shower and then going down and making a beat with it and then writing a song over it.
So how
and
does
now I got
inspiration
68
find you?
songs.
Like, how do you said you love starting with something. So are you like a blank canvas?
Oh, I love a blank
Yeah?
canvas. I love it. Nothing better to me than a blank canvas, because that's where I can put all of my vision down, is on the blank canvas. I don't start with anything. Everything's blank. Every day, like, I'll make a song. I'm 68 songs into this new album that I'm only going to pick 12 for. You know what I mean? And a ton of them are way different. You've heard it. Some are like way trap, and some of them are like real classical, just urban hip hop, you know, and others are just rock. And it's just like, I don't like going like, oh, this is the popular music now, I have to make this music. Everyone's like, why are you still making that old music? Or why are you making rock? Rock's dead. It's like, because I love this. This is what I love to do. I'm not doing it because of anyone else. I'm doing it for myself. If people like it, cool.
And
But
that's
if
great
not-
that's great that you're able to do that. I think that a lot of the times, and my question is like, how have you been able to, like, are you making that in your spare time? Are you making that professionally? Because what a lot of people come back at me and say is that when they start working for the corporate clients, they have to be more in the box, and they kind of forget to do it for themselves. So what's your secret
do
to kind of
both.
overcome that?
I do both. I do my corporate stuff, you know, in the day, and then at night, instead of watching TV, I go and make music for myself. And sometimes that's the best. Like, we talk about this a lot too, is like right before I'm feeling like really groggy or sleepy, that's when my best creatives come out. When I'm in that state, it's like some zen state, and it's just like, it's this crazy state. I feel like everyone's
state.
asleep. The whole country's just calm, and you know, or the United States is calm, and I'm able just to tap into this great frequency.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad that you bring that up. It's like the creativity trigger, and everybody has a different one. Like,
Yeah.
mine is fatiguing my muscles, like 3 days of intense MMA training,
Yeah.
and then like just stretching it out. Like,
See, I love that
like
too.
In like that is when I feel like I feel like I'm not writing. I feel like I'm documenting the movies in my head,
And it's
of
also-
like how my life is playing
Yeah,
out, and it's that same
absolutely.
like that.
And we
flow
talk
trigger.
about that too, and like not doing the same exercise all the time, because a lot of people get in the habit of doing the same exercises all the time, and then they hit this plateau, and they're like, I don't know why I've plateaued. It's because you're doing the same stuff. Like, get out and do something different. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it's also a balance of the
Goes back to the productivity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also another thing that it goes back to is the balance of the masculine and the feminine. Like, you know, it's like your business coach and your feminine leadership coach. It's like MMA and yoga. And I think like finding that balance and kind of calibrating throughout is how you maintain that creativity and be able to mitigate fear. And then another thing that I just thought of that, you know, as we talk about blank canvas, and I know about design, is when if you've ever noticed like a lot of design, like places, like you see a lot of white space in here. When you look at white space, your mind is actually more prone to be creative, because when you're looking and you're taking in, like, everything's photons, right? These are just focused light. That's all we're seeing. When you see that, I'm not actually reading Hustle Up. I'm reading the breaks in the white space. And so when you have more white space, it really lets your mind be able to focus and like be creative and just do things. So a blank canvas is honestly a good thing to spawn creativity. It might be perceivably one of those things that's like
But it's still
the hardest
scary.
thing. Exactly. It's still the hardest thing.
It's that first big
Yeah.
leap.
Exactly.
That's when the fear comes in. 'Cause
And
it's
that's the
like,
hardest thing,
when you
like-
see it, you're thinking like about the end result almost
Right,
always.
right.
Because you have this beautiful white thing, and you're just gonna mess it up.
And
Yeah.
I
right?
agree 100%.
And it has to be perfect.
100%, because the hardest part is getting the song going. It's like that first line.
Yeah.
But after I write like 2 bars, I'm in.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
shh.
Yeah.
But it's getting those first 2 to like hook the audience. You know what I mean?
I do. I love that.
I
And something you
overthink.
said a minute ago, as you were saying, I loved how you pointed out the flow state is kind of from the masculine and feminine, the MMA and the yoga, the business coach, and the other business coach. I didn't really recognize that, and I love that. And I would just offer a different word for, instead of balance, I love the word contrast for those. I feel that contrast is another one of those creativity sparks that anybody can use anywhere when you have that contrast. And I think that balance can sometimes have this idea that's more in tune with harmony when you're trying to have this balance between all areas of life, where going back to the enjoyment of life, the ups and the downs, well, the downs make the ups that much sweeter. So I
That's
just
true.
like
Yeah.
the word contrast a little bit more than
No,
balance for
I
that.
agree. I agree. And you got to think of when you do art, and you know this from filming and photography, the whole goal is to properly contrast light and shadows. I think you even said that earlier as
And it's
far
just
as
having
more
an
of an
eye.
internal thing.
It's
Yeah,
having an eye
right.
for things.
On the topic of contrast, it's our
Interesting.
play hard, work harder.
Yeah.
See, we play hard, and there's no apologies, and it's not hidden. So when you're enjoying life and you're also working at it, it gives you that freedom to enjoy.
It's like the play hard, work harder thing comes from, it's like life and energy, all that should always come first, but you should always be working harder than you're playing. And that doesn't mean like reach. And that's kind of another answer to your question is, life always comes first. So what you were asking him of what's the difference in creativity when you're creating for yourself and when you're creating for other people. And it's, if you always have life coming first, then whether you're doing something for someone else and it limits your creativity, or whether you're doing it for yourself, it's all a micro piece to the macro. And I think that's an important thing to know, and just harness that creativity and move it along and keep everything synchronized too. That's another last question I got for you, because we're running low on time. Do you keep everything you do synchronized, or are you like, that looks cool, let me do that, and then if an opportunity that's completely decoupled from what you're trying to do flies in from left field, you capitalize on that? Or
Spontaneous or meticulous planner?
Oh.
Perfect.
Or both.
Yeah.
Or neither.
I would say, and I would have to edit it and I guess say intentional planner. So one of the things that I do every day is, and this goes back to, again, like the study of neuroscience and quantum physics, like the universe responds to who you're being. And so who you're being is how you're feeling. It all comes down, the quality of our lives comes down to the quality of our feelings. So when we're talking about manifesting, I'm like, what's the intention behind it? How do you want to feel? And so for me, every morning I'll do my gratitudes, and then I'll set a daily intention, because being in that high state of appreciation and then setting an intention is how the universe responds to you. So I set a daily intention for feeling, and a lot of the times that'll be the opposite. So say I'm trying to plan something, say I'm struggling with something, say that I'm feeling not proud of myself or that I haven't accomplished enough. Well, by the end of the day today, I'm going to feel accomplished. By the end of the day today, I'm going to feel peaceful. And then I think that allows the flexibility to, whether it be spontaneous or meticulous, it kind of gives me that flow where I can be like, maybe some days I sit down and I'm like, okay, I need to strategize. And then maybe some days it's whatever, just, you messaged me on Instagram and I was like, let's have a call. And I was like, easy,
Here we
yes,
are, yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's both, but I think being intentional about how you want to feel
Yeah.
allows for the flexibility between the
So
both,
like you
the
are
two.
what you think.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, what do you have going on that people can get involved with? Where can they find you? You said you're running a beta test with people who are designers. We've got those people kind of tune into this podcast. Those kind of people tune in. So what do you have going on that people can get involved with, and how can they reach out?
Great. I would say that, you can always email me at christy@christyrenee.co, not .com. But I'm sure that that'll be in the show notes, or Instagram. I love getting DMs, seeing stories. It's, Instagram really started as a creators network, and I really like that. That's the one that speaks to me the most. And it's as Christy sees it, with underscores between each word. Again, I'm sure that'll be in the show notes. As far as what I have going on, if you're a department head at a design agency, like I said, and you're looking to speed up the creative process and remove creative blocks, definitely reach out. If you are sitting here and you feel inspired, you're like, I really want to get more in tune. I'm wearing masks. I don't feel inspired. I don't know what makes me happy. I don't know how to change my life. Maybe I know all of that, but I'm too scared. How do I break free? I'm doing the group training on resiliency and actually taking the roots of who you are and breaking ground on the new life. That is the step-by-step training I'll be doing in February with 2 other trainers. And then, as I said, I'm just trying to get involved and hang with some creatives. Like, if you have an idea for something, let's work on a project together. Let's go play. Let's paint. Let's run around like kids. Like, let's just bring fun back.
Live like kids.
Yeah.
Creativity equals, or could be synonymous to, intentional manifestation. Accurate or no?
Creativity is intentional manifestation. Sure.
That's just because that's my definition after talking to you now.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you can create or manifest things into the physical realm based off your intention is what creativity is, or what you create.
Charlie called it superpowers. Man,
Yeah.
I got superpowers.
I got superpowers, yeah. And then you spoke on you almost went quantum there for a minute, and that could be a whole nother rabbit hole.
That's where I was about to go.
Yeah, we'll have to do another
wrap
podcast on that, because
up.
we love talking about that. You know, whether it's has to do with arts or humanitarian topics or science, we've noticed that there's underlying principles that exist in all of them, and that's what he was talking about. Have you heard of the Hermetic principles? Are you familiar with that?
If I have, not by that name.
So it's the oldest text that that humans have been able to find, and it's essentially the 7 laws of the universe. And you find them in philosophy, you find them in science, and you find them in religion. So definitely, for anyone listening, something interesting to look into. This has been really awesome. It's been great to hear your perspective, because you've had so much life experience that's led into it. I've never assimilated creativity with fear, and now I understand that feedback loop, or that loop of how it exists together, and the contrast, and not the balance, but the contrast. And I like that a lot. And anyone listening, guys, she's amazing. Please get involved in any way you can. We'll have her website in the description, as well as her social media. Thank you so much for being on here. This has been a really inspiring conversation. I know I'm going to go back and work harder to create, or work harder to eliminate my fear of creation, because I think you put up a question on your Instagram the other day. I know you like to put up questions and get your community involved. And you said, what blocks do you have in creativity? And I said, sometimes I'll get writer's block when I'm lyric writing. And I think now, after this conversation, I'm able to look back at that and say it's because I'm trying to hit a certain cadence, or I'm trying to hit a certain melody, or I'm trying to say a certain thing. But I really just need to, let it go and just create and just write down, and I can go from there. So,
and I'll share one really quick
Please,
tip. I know we're running out of time.
No.
One of the best things to do to get out of your head is doing morning pages. So, this is a technique that you think that's actually going to take time away, and you'd say, I don't have enough time. But the morning pages, you sit down in the morning, you write 3 pages of basically just brain dump. It frees up your mind, all of your mind space for all of the little things, like I need to go to the dry cleaners today. I don't know, whatever you think, I suck and I can't do this. Whatever you think, put it down, and it gets it out. And then you'll start to see that by the end of the pages, you're usually writing what you want to call in. And it's so hard for somebody else to hijack your day from there, or the writer's block that's getting in your way, you'll write about it, and then that'll be all out of the way, and then you kind of just flow better and get time back. So
wow. I'm happy you said that. We're going to clip that and put that out on social. That's a great clip. So I appreciate you saying that. Christy, thank you again so much. Everyone listening or watching, thank you guys for tuning in. You know who we are, Hustle Up. No vowels in hustle, but there is a U in up. www.hstlup.com, at HSTLUP. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Clint.
I'm Matt.
I'm Christy.
Play hard, work harder, and until next time, hustle up.